Now that you've got your video edited, let's talk in this video about exporting and the best export settings to use. So I've got a project pulled up in Premiere here with the drummer. What I'm going to do is, now that this video is done, I'm going to go up to File and Export Media, or just hit Command M to bring up the export box. Now you see that in this window we've got all sorts of settings that we can work with. You can get really advanced into a lot of this stuff, but for most of you, 99% of you, there's only a few things that you really need to look at. So let's go through a few of those things. The first thing that you want to look at in your export settings is the format at the top. So first of all, we're going to come up here and choose the format box. And there's going to be a drop down of all sorts of different formats that you can use when you're exporting your video. Now, 90% of the time, you're probably going to want to choose the H.264 format. H.264 is a codec that is used for anything that goes on the internet. There are other ones that you can use, but 99% of the time, this is the one that is used for YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Vimeo, anywhere that you're uploading video to the internet. And for most of you, most of the time, probably that's where your videos are going to end up going. I know most of the work that I do, whether it's for a client or obviously for a YouTube video or for a course or whatever, most of the time is meant to be played on a website, on a YouTube channel, for social media, somewhere. That is where most of the video content today is being produced. And so this is the format that you're going to want to choose for that. Now, in the other cases where maybe you're shooting something, let's say you're exporting a short film for a movie festival, or it's something that is meant to be played on a projector or on a TV screen for at an exhibition or something like that. You know, there's other different scenarios. This is where most likely you're probably going to want to choose QuickTime and then come down to your video codec down here and choose Apple ProRes. Now, ProRes is definitely by far the most popular format to use for that type of thing. This is for when you need something that is the highest quality. ProRes is going to give you a beautiful image with no artifacts, basically zero compression. You're just going to get a perfectly clean image that looks just like it does in your editing software. No problems. However, you are going to have a much larger file size. And so that's the reason why H.264 exists. H.264 is a format that gives you still a very high quality image, but it is compressed a certain amount in order to make it small enough so that it will work on the internet or, you know, uploaded to the web or just load quickly on a computer. ProRes is going to give you the highest quality, but it's going to be the fastest. Now, the downside of ProRes kind of is that it is an Apple format. So this was developed by Apple, which means it only works on Apple computers. That is kind of changing over the years. Like Premiere Pro now supports ProRes even on PCs as well. So it used to be kind of a sticking point for a while. That's been kind of changing. It's being adopted by more people. ProRes is by far the most popular, though, now being used as a high quality video codec just because it just looks so great, and for the quality that you get, the file size is relatively small. Now, if you are exporting something for the very specific scenario of it's something that is meant to be played on a Windows PC specifically, and the person that has the Windows PC doesn't have software that will play ProRes, because there is some software out there that will play it, you know, if you're in that very specific scenario, then you maybe want to use something like a WMV or an AVI or something like that. But that's very rare, and in all the years that I've been doing this, I've never had to do that. So for me, it's basically always between H.264 and QuickTime. Okay, so for this video, since we're going to be uploading this to the internet, I'm going to choose H.264, and then we'll go from there. Now, once you choose a format, you'll have the option to choose a bunch of presets. So typically, you'll be able to choose from different presets that are, you know, setting up the settings automatically for you for a specific scenario. You can go through here and change this. So like, for example, if you're uploading to YouTube, maybe you choose the YouTube preset. This is going to choose the best settings for YouTube automatically, or Vimeo, there's one there for them. Usually what I do is I just leave it on match source high bitrate. It's just going to match the sequence settings. So as long as you have your sequence and your timeline set up correctly and at the right frame rate and the right resolution, then you're totally fine. And then the high bitrate is going to give you a high quality. We'll talk about that in a minute. Now, next up is the output name. So if I click on this video here, it will give me the title, so I can change the title of the video, and then I can choose the folder that I want to save it in right there. All right. Now, next I have a couple options whether I want to choose to export video and audio. If it's a normal video, you'll just have both of those selected. If you, for some reason, are exporting just an audio track, you could choose just audio, or if your video doesn't have audio, you could export just the video. Now, that's most of what you have to deal with. Most of the stuff that happens on the rest of this page is most of the time, you're probably just going to leave it at default. But let me go through a couple other things here just in case. So under basic video settings, you've got the resolution of the video. Now, this is a video that was shot in 4096 by 2048. So this is 4K in a 2:1 aspect ratio. This resolution that you want to choose here, typically, as long as you have this checked, it's going to choose the aspect ratio of your timeline. So this is the ratio of my timeline, the resolution of my timeline. It's just going to use that. If you're in a situation where you want to export at a lower resolution, for example, so let's say I shot this in 4K, but I want to export it at 1080p, then I can do that here. I can simply uncheck this box, and then I can choose the exact aspect ratio that I want. So I could set this to 1920. And then because I have the aspect ratio locked here, it's going to automatically give me my height of 960. Again, this is not 1080 because it's a 2:1 aspect ratio, not 16:9, the video that I shot here, okay? So that would be our HD equivalent of this video at 1920 by 960. Now, the frame rate and the aspect ratio and the square pixels and everything else here, you're going to leave that all just checked because that's just going to pull from your timeline, which should be set up correctly. Now, the rest of this stuff, there's a few other options that you can do. And, if you're just going for a normal export, if you don't need like crazy high quality or anything like that, these settings would be just fine. You don't have to do anything else. You could go ahead and click export at the bottom. If you want the highest quality, especially when it comes to H.264, if you really care about the quality looking the best that it possibly can, there's a few options that you want to select. The first one is render at maximum depth. That is going to force Premiere to render the video at the maximum bit depth, which will give you the highest quality video. And then if you scroll down here into the bitrate settings, you have a few other options. This will default to VBR 1pass. VBR means variable bitrate. A variable bitrate means that the amount of data that it's allocating to a specific frame of the video depends on what's happening in the frame. So if you have frames where it's just a static shot and nothing is moving, then the encoder is going to give less data. It's going to spend less time on that part of the video because it doesn't need to. And then if you have frames where there's a lot of action happening, it will spend more time on those frames to make sure that they're super clean. So that's a variable bitrate. That's a really good thing, especially with H.264. That's what allows it to be a much smaller file size because it's kind of got this smart approach to where it's allocating data in the video. Now, with variable bitrate, you can choose 1pass or 2pass. If you're going for the highest quality, I highly recommend choosing 2pass. What that's going to do is Premiere is going to go through and encode the video twice and do 2 layers of it just to make sure that it comes out as best as possible. And then just below that, you have the option to choose your target bit rate. So a higher bit rate is going to give you a larger file size, but a cleaner quality. A lower bit rate will give you the opposite. The default bit rate for a 1080p video is somewhere around 10 or 12 megabits per second. So you'll notice that this is telling me when I have it set to 10 that my estimated file size is 61 megabytes. If I start to increase this, so let's say I put this to 20, now my estimated file size goes up to 120 megabytes. So the more you go up with this, the larger your file size is going to be. When you're working with 1080p footage, like I said, the default is usually around 10 or 12. I recommend going up to, if you want the highest quality, somewhere around 2 or 3 times that, so maybe 20 or 30. Anywhere beyond that, you start to get the law of diminishing returns. The file size is going to get a lot bigger, but you won't be able to notice as much the difference. Now, if we change our resolution here back to 4096 or 4K like it was, you'll notice that the default bitrate setting actually goes up to about 40 or 50. It didn't change because I already did it. But usually it's around 40 or 50, and I think YouTube recommends something around 45 or 50 for your bitrate, so you can set that or put it a little bit higher. It's up to you, but the general rule of thumb applies. The higher the bitrate, the higher quality you're going to get on your video. So once you have all of your settings set up correctly, you'll notice that it'll tell you down here your estimated file size. As long as you're okay with that and that's all good to go, then you should be ready to export. You have a couple of different options when it comes to exporting. You can either hit Q or you can hit export right off the bat. Export will just start exporting the video immediately, but it will lock up Premiere Pro so that you can't export or work inside of Premiere Pro with anything else while it's exporting. You have to wait till it's done. Q will do something a little bit different, where it actually takes the file and puts it into Adobe Media Encoder and creates a queue of files that you can export. So this is really handy if you're doing an export where you're trying to export different formats. Let's say you shot a video for a client and you want to give them 4 or 5 different formats of the video that they can use in different scenarios. Then you could use this where you queue them all up together, and then you just hit start on the media encoder and it'll take care of all of them all at once. So there you go. There's a video about how to export your videos with the right settings. I hope that was helpful, and we'll see you on the next one.